Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's a rare tag video today. I haven't done one of these for a while, but it's time for my year in review. So this is a tag video I did last year, and I thought it would be good to do it again because it gives me a good range of questions looking at some of my favourites, some of my highlights of the books that I've read in 2022. With these 10 questions, as much as possible, I'm going to mix it up and not choose duplicates, but of course it is asking me my favourites in various categories, and if I'm going to be truthful in answering those, sometimes there will be a bit of duplication. So this one will be short and sweet. Let's just dive in with question 1. That one is the big one. What has been my favourite book of 2022? Now, I thought long and hard about this because when I was putting together the answers to these questions, I also at roughly the same time put together my top 10 of the year as well for another video I'll be filming soon. And that was very, very difficult. I was able to pick 10, 11, 12, but then narrowing it down to 10 and choosing a rank for those 10 was really tough. The one that I did pull out on top though, there are a few factors involved in it. One is of course my overall enjoyment, which did make Bonds of Chaos by Zach Argyle my favourite book of the year. The other factors that went into it are not quite nostalgia, but it's the overall kind of finishing of a series as well as the book. So it's kind of got the advantage of having those previous two books, which I also really enjoyed, Voice of War and Stones of Light, because I really had a good time with those, and I loved how this wrapped up that series. It's one of the series that will be going onto my top list when I film the next iteration of that, because I absolutely had a great time with it. But this was a beautiful ending to the series. I love the characters in here. I love the journey that they undertook and how several of those characters ended their story with this final volume. So a real highlight of the year for me. I was so pleased to receive a copy of this from Zach, and I loved every minute reading it. And it was actually minutes as well, because I blasted through this in a day. So it wasn't even days reading it, it was minutes and hours. So that's testament to how much I enjoyed this one. It's my favourite book of the year. Question 2, what is the favourite series of mine that I started this year but I haven't yet finished? So I'm ongoing with this one, and I've picked out of a couple of really strong candidates. I picked the one that I've actually read a few books from rather than just the opening book. This one is The War Eternal by Rob J. Hayes, starting with another of my favourite books of the year, Along the Razor's Edge. I had a great time listening to the audio of this one. Book 2 and 3 I've done as well, and they were both really good as well. This one set the bar so high though. It was absolutely brilliant, and I loved the audio. It was a fantastic performance and really heightened my enjoyment of it. So this is going to be one of the series that I'm looking to continue and wrap up in 2023, and I can't wait to see where it goes. The other side of that, with question 3, I'm going to give a quick answer to because it's my favourite series that I finished. And obviously with this one I had fewer series to choose from. I think I finished 6, maybe 7 series, depending on how you look at it. Check out my series review video for more information on that. But the one that I finished that I enjoyed the most, that's upside down. It's a duplicate. It's Threadlight by Zach Argyle. So a quick answer because I've just spoken about it, but I loved the books in this series, and as I said, this was a fantastic finale to it. So absolutely recommend it. If you haven't read Threadlight, it is a great recommendation. Question 4 is the favourite new author that I've discovered this year, and I am going to cheat on this one because I've only read a small number of books from each of them, but I'm going to pick 3 different authors. So the first one is L.L. McRae, and I've read the novella The Cittering Key and also the novel The Iron Crown, and I'm really looking forward to both the follow-up to that, The Shadowgate, and also her kind of debut series, The World of Linaria. And I've got Marauder on my 2023 plan as one of the self-pub titles I'm going to be looking for. So I really enjoyed the time reading L.L. McRae's work, and I can't wait to continue with it. Next I've got Rob J. Hayes, so I've just spoken about him briefly with The War Eternal and Along the Razor's Edge, so I've only read 3 books from him, all within that same series, but I have got a few other books that I'm looking forward to, so I'm going to be reading The Ties That Bind in 2023, and also I would imagine some of the Mortal Technique series. So lots to look forward to from him because he's been quite a prolific author. And then the same can be said for the third of the authors I've chosen. This is Ben Gelly, who's got lots of different series under his belt already. I'm partway through Emaneska, or I say partway through. I've only read book one, The Written, but I had such a great time with it. I know that I'm going to enjoy the rest of that series. Once I've done that, I've already got the Forever King, which is the start of a follow-up series to Emaneska, so there's plenty for me to enjoy within that same world. Question 5 is my favourite new character, and although I've not read this particular book, I'm going to use it as my example. It's A Fool's Hope by Mike Shackle, because the character I've selected is Tinstra, and in this signed and personalised and illustrated copy, I've got a picture of Tinstra from the author, so I really love this paperback. It's a great addition to my collection, and I'm going to be reading this one in 2023 as well. I love a kick-ass female protagonist, and although this series, The Last War, is multi-POV, Tinstra is one of those POV characters, and she definitely kicks ass. Although that's not the full story with her, there's a lot of character development, and I loved seeing her grow to become that kick-ass character. So I can't wait to carry on this series because I really love the story, but I loved a few of the characters as well, and first and foremost of those is Tinstra. Question 6 is my favourite new release of the year. So I read quite a few new releases actually, so I have plenty to choose from. I've kind of cheated here though as well because I have selected two. One is a novella, and then I've chosen a full-length novel to go along with it as well. Although there's maybe not a vast amount of difference in the page count between the two. That's because I've chosen the large novella by Ryan Carhill. This is the Exile book, 2.5 in the Bound and the Broken series. I had an absolutely great time with this. I really enjoyed the character of Dane when he was introduced in Of Darkness and Light, and it was great to get all the backstory and learn more about him, but also to learn more about the world and the politics of it and all of the different things that go along with it. So I loved The Exile. It was another fantastic addition to this particular world. Now I've also chosen a much lesser known title, at least as far as I'm aware. I really had a great time with the heist story, which was Silver Queendom by Dan Cobbold. I got a review copy of this through NetGalley because I loved the cover. I thought it looked really interesting but also sounded great, and I do like a heist story, and that's what you got here. It wasn't just a kind of single heist and everything building up to it. There were lots of little jobs that the crew went on as they got towards this final heist as well, and I love that because you got to see a lot more. It wasn't just planning and getting everything together for one big job, one big payoff. I loved this story. I don't know if there's going to be more in this world, but if there is, I'm going to be there for it. Question 7 is my favourite reread of the year, and this is really easy for me because I don't generally reread, but this year I did exactly one reread and it was a good one, so I don't mind including it as the answer is Blue Moon Rising by Simon R. Green. This is one of my favourite books just for nostalgia's sake. It's not one of the best written or my favourite stories or groups of characters or anything along those lines, but it will always have a special place in my heart as one of my gateway books to fantasy. But I listened to the graphic audio of this as a buddy read with my book bestie Nina, and we both had a great time with it. So I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that it kind of stood up in my memory. It didn't really tarnish my memory of reading this. It was a different medium, but it was still a good time. Question 8 is my biggest surprise of the year, and for this one there are a couple I could have gone with, but when I really thought about it, a few of them weren't really surprises. I was kind of expecting to have a good time with them. The one that really jumped out as a surprise for me is because it kind of came from nowhere. I had no expectations going into it. I picked it up as a 3B on Audible and it was absolutely amazing. And we're going back to this one. It's Along the Razor's Edge by Rob J. Hayes, book 1 of the War Eternal. And I said earlier on that the audio, the narration by Moira Quirk was absolutely top notch for this one and really made what was probably a really high scoring book anyway. It really made it score even higher. So it was a great read, a great character there in Esker. But for me, the surprise of this was how much I enjoyed it, largely because that audio was absolutely perfect. It fit the character, it fit the theme and the tone brilliantly. So again, this is a great recommendation if you like a bit of dark and you like a bit of foul language with your fantasy. And then question 9, conversely, we're going to my biggest disappointment of the year, and sadly for me, I do have a few to select from this one, but the one that I've picked out is a rare sci-fi, I guess. I'm going for A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. I'd heard such good things about this. I was really hoping for a really cool space opera, and I was just completely let down. Now, I listened to this on audio, but I don't think it was actually the audio that really did it for me. It was more the writing itself, and one of the key things that I didn't like in here was the character names, or the kind of naming convention of the Texkalani Empire. It was just a bit stupid. It took me out of the situation. It took me out of the kind of enjoyment. I couldn't get deep into it because every time a new character came along called something like 36 Razor Blade or some other nonsense, I just couldn't do it. It just didn't work for me whatsoever, and that massively affected my enjoyment of it. Overall, I thought the idea was pretty cool, but it wasn't developed enough for me. It didn't get delved into enough for me in this particular book. I'm not going to find out if that changes in book 2, because this one, for me, that's as far as I'm going. And then question 10 is the book that I'm going to recommend, the one book that I'll recommend to everyone from this year. And again, it's one that I'm going to cheat on because I've got 2 titles. Part of that is because you cannot just have one book, or I will not have just one book that I will recommend to absolutely everyone, because everyone is different. We all have different tastes. You need to kind of ask the question first, what kind of book do you enjoy, and so forth. But in the spirit of answering the question, I have selected 2 because I've read some sci-fi this year and I've read a lot of fantasy this year, and I'm going to go for one from each. So the sci-fi first. This was one of those other contenders for the most surprising title for me, but it was one that I had a bit of inside knowledge of, or not inside knowledge, but I knew a bit about the author and I thought that I would have a good time with it, and I really did. This is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I, again, listened to this one and loved the audio. I think I did get more from listening to the audio than I would from reading the book, but I still think I would have had a really good time if I did read it. There was just one kind of small element that made quite a big impact though in the audio, so that's the only kind of real difference for me. As someone who hasn't read the book, that's the only real difference I can really see from listening to the book rather than reading it. But I love the story in this. I thought it worked really well with the amnesia trope that I don't usually tend to be a fan of. I thought it was really well developed in this. It was really well worked, and I loved the combination of science and humour, and the way that our character goes about figuring out what's going on, where he is, who he is at the start of the book, and then moving on from there as he finds out what the situation is and what he's going to do about it. I really had a great time with it. I'm looking forward to whenever the movie comes out, because I also really loved The Martian, which is why I thought I would have a good time with this one, and I was right. Now for fantasy, this is actually one of my most recent reads. I literally finished it a day or 2 ago, so there is a bit of sort of proximity bias because I've only just put the book down. But as a fantasy that I think I could recommend to any lover of fantasy, I'm going to go for Mark Timony's The Blood of the Spear, because this has got those classic fantasy vibes. It's got a lot of the themes that I really love from a good epic fantasy, but it doesn't feel like classic fantasy because they are sometimes some really slow burn, big, beefy books. And although this one is quite beefy, it was really fast paced. It really got into things quickly. It didn't really let up for a moment, and it worked really well for this. Sometimes you get that and it feels rushed. It's too fast paced. This one for me was paced perfectly. So it's a definite recommendation and a real good time that I had with it. So there we go, that's my year in review. Overall, I had a great reading year, and these were some of the highlights that I really enjoyed. I hope you had some really good books as well. Let me know in the comments down below the answers to any of these questions that you want to share. While you're down there, as usual, check out all my social media and support the channel links. Come and interact, come and join us in the book club Discord, in my Patreon, or just on Instagram, Twitter, whatever you want to, whatever you're comfortable with. I'd love to expand the audience and the community and have a real good time talking fantasy and a bit of sci-fi with all of you. That's everything for me today though. Thanks very much for spending this time with me. I hope to see you in the next one sometime soon. Until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.